Hey fellow tankers, this is Mobius Y speaking once again here with another episode in the Road to the E4 series, and we've reached the final episode in this little series in episode 6 here, as I am showcasing the Tier 10 US tank destroyer, the T110E4. If that wasn't obvious by this point, well, I just don't know what to tell you. Anyways, so a brief synopsis on the T110E4. I do actually quite like it. I still feel it's kind of overpowered in a couple aspects. Cough, cough, premium ammo penetration, cough. And it's definitely one of the more kind of balanced Tier 10 tank destroyers, I suppose you could say. In the fact that it's just really not that maneuverable. Its armor is unreliable at best. The gun is also fairly unreliable, as it doesn't have very good gun handling. A couple other things to go with it, but with that being said, I quite like this tank. Starting off, I did not like it one bit. I actually had a pretty strong hate on for this tank, but I'm attributing that to the fact that I didn't quite fully grasp it yet. My first 30 games, I was really disliking this tank, but by the time of this review, I have, I believe, about 70 or 80 games in it, and I have a much more positive appreciation for this tank now, I suppose you could say. So let's just jump straight into the overall statistics and armor values on tanks.gg right away here. The two games that I want to show you, they are kind of long, I believe, so I'm going to try and keep this episode 30 or 40 minutes long tops. So we're going to jump straight into looking at the package on the T110E4, give a synopsis on the hard statistics. We'll take a look at the armor on tanks.gg as well as the module locations from wotinfo.net. So taking a look at the package on the T110E4. The engine has 875 horsepower. That's not bad. That's a pretty big engine, honestly, in this game. But the E4 is still quite slow. It's not going to accelerate quickly. It's not going to take off at 40, 45 kilometers an hour. It's not mobile like a Object 268, for example. The gun itself, this is the real saving grace for the E4. It's all about this tank's gun. It fires only 3.08 rounds per minute, so you do have a faster rate of fire over the T-30's final 155mm gun. The penetration values for this gun, you have 295mm of penetration with the standard armor-piercing ammo, and that should be enough to penetrate anything if you know the weak points on every tank you're going to face. That is more than enough to penetrate anything. You can penetrate the front of a T110E3 right in the middle of its lower plate with this kind of penetration. However, if that's not enough for you, you can load up some skill rounds with 375 penetration. Armor be damned, I'm gonna hurt you. That's what these rounds are for. If you're in a really tough spot and you just fired an AP shell, whether it bounced or not, you can just quickly switch ammo types and start the reload process to load up one of these APCR if you just have to get another big damage rollout. And speaking of damage, the average alpha on these really big shells is 850 for each of them. Again, more alpha than the T-30's final 155mm gun. The high explosive shell has 90mm of penetration. Really good penetration value for an HE shell. And it does 1100 alpha damage, roughly. So this is a really good shell to load up if you want to hit a really weakly armored opponent, such as a Waffenträger off East 100 right in the turret. You're going to do at least 1,000 damage with it. The aim time and accuracy kind of let this gun down, though. The aiming time is 2.9, which is quite poor, but fairly average for this line. You should be used to it from using the T-30's 155mm gun. It's the same aim time at 2.9, and seeing as you need 211,000 experience to jump from a fully upgraded T-30 to the E4, you should be used to that aim time by now. The accuracy does improve over the T-30, I believe, but not by much. It's only 0.37, so still not that great accuracy, but just enough, especially if you play the E4 to its strengths as well as try to overcompensate its weaknesses. The E4, as I said, is not very maneuverable. Its hull traverse is only 26 degrees per second, and the turret traverse, a staple of this line, is very poor at 18 degrees per second. So you really need to plan your movements, anticipate the moves that enemies are going to play, especially mediums that try to circle you. You need to anticipate those by being prepared to turn your hull and or turret in the direction you expect to have them come at you and try and circle you, or so on and so forth. The view range is a standard tier 10, 400 meters. Very, very basic there. You can outspot mediums and lights if you set the tank up properly, of course. So let's take a look at the supplies that I had equipped as well as the equipment immediately afterwards. Taking a look at the supplies here, there's not much ammo in the E4. You've only got 27 shots, so 20 of those I load normal armor-piercing standard ammo. It's also fairly cheap to fire these, kind of, sort of, for the amount of damage and penetration they get. So they pay dividends just firing normal armor piercing. Now, for those clutch moments where I am clenching my butt cheeks together, I mount 6 APCR, and that should be all you need. These APCR are really expensive, over 5,000 silver. Some of the most expensive premium ammo in the game. For sure. And for the high explosive, as I mentioned, you're going to do at least 1,000 damage on a penetrating hit with a high explosive round. But the long reload on the T110E4, I feel, does not warrant me constantly switching ammo types, so I only mount one of these. It's really nice to have one of these, though, for a Borsig or Waffle 4 or a Waffenträger off E100, and you just want to smack them for a good 1,000, 1,200 damage, whatever. Really nice thing to have, but again, I only mount one of these. Consumables, very standard for my loadouts at tier 10. Large repair kit and large first aid kit to help improve the repair of modules by 10%, as well as reduce the chance of my crew members getting hurt. I'll go into that a little bit more later as to why I mount a large first aid. And an automatic fire extinguisher, of course, very standard automatic fire extinguisher there. You definitely want an automatic fire extinguisher on this tank if you do not have preventative maintenance and or firefighting trained on your crew, for sure. Not bad choices for equipment right there. You could mount something like Cola to really cut down on the reload time, but I strongly recommend you either swap it out with the first aid kit and train pain tolerance on your crew, or swap it out for the fire extinguisher and train preventative maintenance and firefighting on the crew, for sure. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the equipment that I mount. Pretty standard here. Simply a large caliber tank gun rammer, improved ventilation class 3, and an enhanced gun lane drive. This should look very familiar. This was the same setup for me on the T30. The gun lane drive is pretty much a must in this tank because of the crappy aiming time, obviously. The gun rammer, also necessary because the reload is really long. And the vents is kind of optional. I chose it because it helps with both the aim time, gun handling, and the reload speed, just a little bit. But you could definitely choose to swap out the vents. If you're sick of getting outspotted, for example, you could definitely swap it out with something like coated optics. And there's really not much else to choose from. You could maybe go with a wet ammo rack if you are really sick of getting ammo racked in this tank. Ammo racks are pretty frequent with this thing because there's ammo rack in the very front of it. Or if you don't mind the shortcomings of this gun, you could go full camp and do a camouflage net and binocular telescope. For sure. Me personally, I don't like sniping with this tank. The gun is just a little bit too inaccurate and unreliable for me to take up a constant sniping playstyle with this thing. Absolutely. So with those out of the way, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the armor profile on tanks.gg right now and go into some soft stats on the E4, comparing it to the T30 so that you can get an idea of their handling differences. Okay, so looking at tanks.gg, starting with the armor profile. Now, the first thing to note about the E4, it's nothing like the E3. And if you didn't know that already, well, I don't really have very nice things to say to you. The E4 is nothing like the T110E3. It's not a moving bunker. So you have to be much more wary about where the enemies are, plan your movements accordingly, and be prepared to defend yourself and play to this tank's strengths. The strongest pieces of armor are 300 millimeters thick, and it's above the gun mantlet. It's a really thin strip directly above the gun mantlet. You're getting a value of about 350 millimeters directly above the gun mantlet. Very tough to pen there. The gun mantlet itself, you've got 254 millimeters of spaced armor, so it's pretty strong. Other tier 10 TDs can definitely penetrate it with standard AP or even premium APCR. Heat rounds won't do anything because it's all spaced armor. The turret sides itself, only 203 millimeters thick. These sides around the gun mantlet, Directly around them can be penetrated by high pen guns, such as mediums and even other TDs. But as you go further away from the gun mantlet, it gets more sloped, so it's tougher to pen. The thick belt in the glacis plates is actually only rated at 260, but it's very sloped, so you're getting 300 to 400 values. Pretty tough nut to crack right there. The upper front glacis, you're getting really stupid values, over 300 millimeters, easy with all the sloping there. But the lower plate, which is where you will get penned most of the time in a frontal engagement, you're looking at most 206 and as little as 160. Very easy penetrations there for anybody of your tier that you'll face. Now, a very common weak spot is where the commander sits up here in this machine gun port at the back. The maximum you're getting is 238 millimeters. Everywhere else, you're looking at about 185. So lots of people like to aim for that. Very easy penetrations for them. And the top of the turret itself, it's sloped extremely well. The armor value, the armor thickness is not very much, but just due to natural sloping, anybody shooting at you at the straight and level there will simply auto bounce off. The sides of the E4, very weak, naturally. 76 millimeters of thickness, getting about 109. Also going as low as 48 millimeters behind the tracks. The engine deck at the very back, extremely weak, 40 millimeters tops, no problem. So, like a lot of American vehicles, it's fairly well armored from the front. You can easily bully a lot of Tier 9 and definitely Tier 8 tanks with your frontal armor profile, but if anything gets around to your side or your rear, you're in a lot of trouble, for sure. So let's take a look at some soft stats on the E4 and compare them with the T30. The gun constraints, you sacrifice quite a bit of gun depression and a little bit of gun elevation compared to the T30. You only got 6 degrees of gun depression all the way around with this tank. It's really tough to ridge fight with the T110E4, for sure. But due to this, it does kind of excel in more urban environments or corner fighting. Now, the statistics on the T110E4, a lot of them are very different on the PC compared to our console version. For example, the PC version only has 750 alpha damage with a higher rate of fire for the same amount of DPM. So we're going to ignore those. We're going to simply look at the terrain resistances as well as the dispersion values, and we'll compare them with the T30, the fully upgraded T30 at the previous tier. So there's the T30. Okay, so by comparison, I already mentioned you will have less gun depression. The T30 gets 10 degrees, so it's a much better ridge fighter and a little bit less gun elevation as well. So you do need to play the E4 a little bit differently in positioning due to your lack of gun depression compared to the T30. However, there are some things about it that are better than the T30. For example, the dispersion while moving or traversing the tank is a little bit better than the T30. So you'll find that you'll be able to maintain your accuracy and aim in a little bit more quickly than on the T30. The terrain resistances are mostly the same as well, but you have a little bit better soft terrain resistances, so you will maintain a better speed with the E4 going over crappy, swampy kind of terrain than the T30, for sure. The total health of the of the E4, I forgot to mention, 2,000 hit points on par with the M48 Patton tier 10 medium tank, but most tier 10 mediums you'll have a little bit more HP than them. So that's basically a look at the E4. Remember, it's quite well armored from the front except for this gun port at the top and the lower plate area. So you want to try and protect those as much as possible by rotating your turret back and forth as you retreat behind cover, as well as just kind of serpentining your tank a little bit. This could get you a lot of troll bounces, especially if people are trying to aim in the sides of your turret right next to your gun mantlets. It could definitely cause a lot of that. So that's basically a look at the armor modules and the soft stats. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the crew and module locations from WOTinfo.net. Okay, so first picture from the front of the T110E4. As you can see, the lower plate, not only is it weak there, but there's a lot of ammo rack there, and it's very easy for your driver to get killed there. This is part of the reason why I mount a large first aid kit. The driver gets killed a lot, for sure. And you definitely need to be prepared to repair your ammo rack if you are exposing your front often, as it will get shot and you will get ammo racked fairly frequently. So probably want to train safe stowage on the crew or mount a wet ammo rack if that bothers you. The left side of the tank, you've got the gunner in the front of the turret and the commander in the very back of the turret. The commander does get knocked out quite a bit when they shoot the machine gun port as well. So expect him to get taken out. You can protect him with either pain tolerance and or a large first aid kit for supplies. The front of the tank behind the tracks, you have more ammo rack. So it's very, like I said, it's very easily ammo racked from the front, either anywhere in the sides or anywhere in the overall front of this tank. And the very back of the tank behind the tracks, you've got your engine deck. Pretty easy to set that on fire if you have shots. If you have shots in that part of the tank, excuse me, for sure. And the very back of the E4, pretty much anywhere in the back is a weak spot, especially the engine deck and the gun port at the top, but the very back in the middle of the tracks there is all engine deck. You can knock out the engine and set this tank on fire very easily if you manage to get behind it. Now, the right side of the T110E4, you'll notice that this tank has two loaders. And they're both sitting in the same spots as the commander and gunner, just on the opposite side of the turret. So I definitely recommend either pain tolerance and or a large first aid kit with your E4 crew to help protect your loaders. If one of these guys dies, then your reload speed is just going out the window and you're borderline useless for the rest of the game. Similar thing with the ammo rack. It's on the right side behind the tracks. And you've got your engine deck in the very back of the tank as well as fuel tanks below the turret. So it's pretty easy to get this thing set on fire as well, for sure. So that's basically a look at the E4's armor module, crew locations, so on and so forth. With that being said, as I mentioned earlier, I do like this tank, for sure. I definitely prefer it over my Object 268, and that's really the only other Tier 10 tank destroyer that I can compare it to. I like the fact that this thing has a turret, even though it doesn't rotate all the way around, but that alone adds an aspect of versatility that no other Tier 10 tank destroyer really has. It does still suffer from a long reload time. You're looking at, I'm trying to remember what mine is off the top of my head. We'll see in a minute in the gameplay here, but it's like 13, 16 seconds, something like that. However, it's made up for with your absolutely scary alpha damage, cutting any Tier 10 medium tank's HP in half unless you low roll with one shot, as well as the ridiculous penetration values. 295 penetration is more than enough to go through the front of any tank if you know your weak points. Even a mouse. A mouse is super easy to pen with 295 penetration. Or if you just want to be lazy, load up the automatic win buttons, the APCR with 375 millimeters of penetration. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But enough of that. Let's jump into some gameplay. We'll get through these games, and then afterwards I'll kind of give a synopsis on the entire T110E4 tank line and my thoughts on each tank down the line to close off this video. So this first game here is Assault on Malinovka. Unfortunately, I really wish they would get rid of this game type. I think it's kind of garbage, but that's beside the point. I knew I was going to have to use my E4 more in kind of a sniping role, which is a technique that I do not like to employ with the E4 whatsoever. So looking at the team composition, there's very few Tier 10s on both teams, only about 4, and just about the rest of the entire teams are Tier 9s and a couple Tier 8s. There is artillery in play, so I didn't want to go to the north side of the map in the B5, A5 sectors, so I decided I'm going to play around in the F7 kind of area, F7, G7, play around in those areas as they're much more protected from artillery. I did not want to get shot by artillery, but I also have good shots up onto the hill, all the way up to kind of B9, A8, as well as anybody that's gone down the hill on the east side of the map. For example, this T62A, unfortunately for him, he stopped. I was able to aim in, pop off my first shot, and nail him for 981 damage. There goes half of his HP right at the start of the game. If I was in his shoes, I would not be a happy camper right about now. But what can you do? And another little note about the E4. As you saw there, the shell velocity on the AP rounds is really not that good. I believe that shot was from about 400 meters, and it still took a good 2 seconds for the shell to actually hit the target and penetrate for damage. So an IS-8 pokes out to line up a shot at me. That's how you get killed by Tier 10 tank destroyers, is you peek out and try to trade a shot with them. Very poor trade for that IS-8, as he missed the weak points on me that he was aiming at. He didn't have very many good shot options anyways, but I smashed back at him for over 700 damage. So that was an extremely poor trade for the IS-8. And right in the beginning parts of the game, I've already done 1600 damage without batting an eyelash. That's the advantage of having something ridiculous like 295 penetration. Duffed the shot on the IS-8 right there. Unfortunately, I simply shot too late. I didn't have time to let the aimer aim in all the way, but if I didn't take the shot, I was going to lose the shot altogether, as the IS-8 would have pulled behind cover. So I know that 62A is still in a pretty strong position. He's spotting out any of my team approaching from the south. So he's kind of become priority 1 at this point. I decide I'm going to reposition from this little mound here by the flag, and I'm going to get a little bit further up towards the flag in another location right next to it. This is right in, I believe, the G7 sector of Malinovka. Very, very effective position for a lot of tanks to play from. Unfortunately, it can get a little bit crowded here if a lot of people like to play this position, but thankfully the only person that came over here with me was our friendly scout tank. So pushing forward to get a shot on this STI. Nobody's aiming at me until quite a bit later, so I have enough time to aim in and get my shot off for 864 damage on that STI up on the hill. And pulling back, I finally spot the enemy scout tank that is also assisting the T-62A in spotting on the south end of the map there. So my heavy tanks in the south cannot progress until we deal with these tanks to my right, namely this 62A. So pulling forward, I see that his tank is outlined, so I probably have a shot on him. And I have a shot on the side of his turret, so I simply aim in. I know he's going to pull up with his fast rate of fire. I readjust and I take the shot, but unfortunately it goes just wide, hitting him more in the front of the turret and not penetrating whatsoever. Our friendly scout pulls up, gets spotted. He fires off one shot, but decides not to move and instantly gets blasted by the enemy E4. So, potentially losing my eyes, I simply realign my shot on the 62A once more, take the shot, and again, the shot just does not quite go where I need it to in the side of the turret, and auto ricochets off of the very top of it. And this is what I mean by long-range shots. The gun can really let you down. 0.37 accuracy, it's not terrible, but it's not really that good either. It's kind of average, in total honesty. But I'm very determined to knock out the 62A. He's just in too good of a spot, and he is rendering my heavy tank friendlies in the south completely immobile. So he pulls too far forward, exposing the entire side of his tank, and I'm able to just thread the needle, taking him out for another 798 damage. So I've already clicked 4 shots on people and racked up over 2,000 damage. In a tank like this, in just about any tier tank destroyer, I would say, when you have something ridiculous like 300 millimeters of penetration, it's really hard to not rack up a crap load of damage really quickly, for sure. So long as you simply know your weak points, you know what tanks you can shoot at what angles and whatnot, and when you're in close, you know where to shoot on certain tanks. It's really hard to not get a crap load of damage. You only need to land 3 of your shots in a tank like this with 850 alpha damage, and you're doing over 2,400, or you should be, so long as you don't low roll every hit. That's just how ridiculous it is. Anyways, the enemy E4 duffed his shot on me. I was able to move out of the way, so that gave me enough time to peek forward, overexposing myself. But he was on the reload, so I aimed in, fired a blind shot. Wasn't sure if it hit. I'm pretty sure later on, though, when he gets respotted, it will show that I actually did hit the shot, and I was able to penetrate him. The enemy scout moved all the way up, so I was trying to keep a wary eye out for him, but it was actually the IS-8 on my right that was still lighting me up. So I was playing very cautious. I needed to take out that IS-8, as now the IS-8 is playing eyes for the rest of his team up there in the north. So he gets hit from the front by somebody. He turns his turret away from me and forgets all about me, allowing me to peek over and plant the last shot into him for a little bit more damage. But more importantly, I was able to take out their eyes on the south side of this map. Quite happy with that kill. Still not sure where the scout went. Knowing that I could very easily peek too far and the scout would light me up instantaneously. So the enemy still has a Waffly 100, an IS-4, and their artillery somewhere up on the hill. As for the rest of the tanks, not sure where they went. The E4 still has not been spotted yet. He could be sitting in the same location where I shot at him earlier. And it's just at that point the scout gets respotted, moving off to my right. So I decide to ignore him, trying to line up a shot on the IS-4's turret side. The shot goes a bit low though, and you can see from the kicked up dirt where the shell landed that it actually went too low and ate dirt. So seeing the scout move all the way down, he's spotting my friendly heavy all the way in the south again. There's not much I can do for him, unfortunately. I try to pull forward and knock out this M103, but the friendly Foch 155 takes him out. Unfortunately, my last heavy tank in the south side of the map here gets killed. Not really much I could do in that situation without overexposing myself. So I decided I'm going to pull forward, see if I can take on this E4. But in my moment of derpiness, I completely forgot that there was still an IS-8 over here. I thought he'd been killed, but I was completely wrong. So moving to position and try and protect myself from the E4, I was going to shoot him, but he gets taken out by a friendly STI. So this allows me to take cover from the E4, baiting his shot into the dirt, and I plant one more into him, right through his turret for 822 damage. Trying to ping the map where their enemy scout is so that our team knows to deal with him. Namely, our artillery knows to deal with him. Unfortunately, our artillery gets taken out by the enemy scout tank, an M41 Bulldog. It's at this moment the enemy artillery whacks me for a pretty significant amount of damage, knocking me down to only about 1,200. That's when the Bulldog takes a blind shot at me right after I got unspotted, hitting me in the side in that really weak side armor, dropping me down to just under 1,100 damage. So I've lost almost half my HP already. And right now the E4 and the Bulldog seem to be kind of focused on me as I am sitting on the flag and getting these cap points. But they're down to 3 tanks, so I know I can push on this E4, bully him into submission since I have much more HP than he does. I can take a hit from him, but he could not take a hit from me. Unfortunately, my shot duffed really badly. It looks like it shot straight into the top of his turret at that auto-slope angle that I mentioned previously by looking at tanks.gg. However, luckily for me, the friendly Foch 155 rolls right up, shoots him in the side of the turret without him really noticing, taking him out of the game. So trying to line up one last shot on the IS-4. I take it. Not sure where the shot went. Could have bounced off of a friendly, but I couldn't quite see where the shell went, to be totally honest. And I didn't see an indicator on my friendly's tank symbol that it actually hit them and bounced off. So our last few friendlies managed to take out their IS-4 as well as the artillery right afterwards, thankfully closing out that game with less than a minute to go, or just barely a minute to go in a Malinovka assault game. 4,353 damage dealt, 2,720 assisted. I was a little unsure how I got the assisted damage, so we'll look at that in a minute. But as you can see, like I said, it's really not difficult to rack up a lot of damage in a tank that has this kind of penetration and this much alpha damage. Over 1,000 assisted damage on the M103, 800, about another 500 on the IS-8, and another 679 on a second IS-8 for sure. 426 assisted damage on the Bulldog. So that's how I was able to net over 2,000 assisted damage right there. Definitely helping with the XP haul that game. So that's a look at the first game, kind of playing the E4, not really to its strengths as I had to land a lot of long-range shots, not the way I like to play the E4 for sure. I'm more comfortable with the E4 in an urban environment where you can get in nice and close, play it like a pseudo-heavy, and trade shot for shot with people who are stupid enough not to just kind of blindly rush you. But with that being said, you always want to go somewhere with support if you wind up playing a more close combat support kind of role with the E4. Which is what you're going to see in this Redshire game here. So looking at the team composition, there's a lot of tier 10 mediums on the other team. And we've got quite a few tier 10 mediums as well, but most notably a couple TDs for sure. A very tier 10 and tier 9 game. Our team mostly comprising of tier 9s. So at first on Redshire, I figured I'm going to go over to the right-hand side over in the E0, F0 kind of sector. Brawl it out there, but upon closer inspection, I noticed that 2 of their tier 9s were actually artillery units, and they were both platoons. So if one of them was even shooting over there, there was a good chance that both of them were going to be shooting onto that side of the map. So I decided, right about now, okay, I'm not going to go that way. We actually have quite a few people going that way. It looks like a full platoon of 4 or 5 people, as well as 2 more tanks. So that entire flank should be fairly well handled. I decided I'm going to go over to the left, back up my medium tanks, and play a much more kind of close range kind of game here, compensating for the poor gun handling on this T110E4. Now, as I said, if you play smart and you play the Protector tank for the first 5 or 6 minutes of this game, Protector HP, it's very easy to rack up 2,400 3,000 damage very quickly with this tank. It only takes 3 or 4 shots to do it, to be totally honest. As I said, this tank has 850 alpha damage, so even if you hit for only about 750 low rolling 3 shots, you're still doing, 2,300 damage in those 3 shots. At that point, you've pretty much done your job, as you've done more damage than you have HP. You've supported your team, you've done your job, and at that point you can be happy with the outcome of the game, pretty much. Tried a snapshot on the bat chat. He was just backing up way too quickly, and I honestly should not have taken that shot whatsoever, as I now had to suffer through a 16.1 second reload speed, which could have cost me if their mediums decided to get super aggressive and push over the hill together, but that wasn't the case. So instead I got into this nice position here. T-62A noticed too late that I actually have a shot into his back. He started rotating his tank to protect his rear drive wheel, but I was already able to land my shot, taking off about half of his HP for some 820 damage. So we've got 2 of our medium tanks over here, one of them being a T-54E1. We've also got myself and our Object 263 tank destroyers on this side of the map. So we've got this side of the map kind of on lockdown. We are still severely outnumbered, but just the presence of myself and this Object 263 really puts kind of a halt on these enemy mediums from just rushing over, focus firing each and every single one of us down. Which, while it might have been successful in taking most or all of us out, especially with the fact that they have a bat chat, they would have suffered a lot of damage in return, for sure. Trying a shot on the AT-15, the great shot ping was me congratulating myself for a job well done, bouncing off of an AT-15 of all bloody things. So the AT-15 plants a shot in my gun port, taking out my commander, so I instantly fix him back into working condition. I was going to push further and actually land a shot on the AT-15, but I saw the other TD spotted, and upon actually looking, I realized it was actually a Death Star. So I was very glad that I decided against pushing as soon as I saw him on the map. Keeping an eye on the map, seeing that he's going to move up. He's actually going to move all the way up and try and shoot me here. There's a medium behind me. Sounds like a bat chat circling an enemy medium, but I've got bigger problems right in front of me. Planting a shot in the front of the Death Star, taking out a good portion of his health. Him shooting me directly in my upper front plate for only about 600 damage. So that shot cost him dearly. He's pretty much going to get killed now, as he's down to a 1-shot, and I am fully willing to sacrifice a hit from this AT-15 if need be. One more shot into the Death Star, finally taking him out. And just like that, in a mere 3 shots, one not even for full damage. I've done about 2,000 damage this game already. So, seeing the 430 push way forward, I've already anticipated he's going to try and keep moving and go for the circle from the looks of things. So I decided I'm going to put my backside up against this house here so that they cannot get directly behind me where my turret cannot turn. That's one of the big weaknesses of the E4. The turret doesn't fully traverse all the way around like with the T30, but you can make up for that by putting your backside into a building or another piece of cover to kind of protect it so that any circling mediums can't just get behind you and you're unable to shoot them. So the 430, as expected, rolls over the hill, tries to plant the shot in me. Not sure where his shot hit, but it bounced right off, so I decided I'm going to have to ignore him and let the friendlies deal with him, as it looks like he's pretty hung up on an Awful Panther right there. Seeing the 62A, I also decided to roll over. He plants a good shot on me. With my dead driver, I'm just not able to turn my hull fast enough to keep up with him, so I know he's going to come around the house and try and plant another shot on me. So I anticipate the move, turn my turret that way, and as soon as he comes around, I simply auto-lock and pull the trigger, and he's out of the game. 2 of their most dangerous tanks on the other team taken out in an instant like that really changed the course of this game. The teams are now pretty much even, looking at a 6-on-5 in the current situation, but 2 of their most dangerous tanks for closing out this late in the game are now dealt with and taken out for sure. Unfortunately, they still have a bat chat that is still alive, so knowing he was somewhere on this side of the map initially, he did circle and kill one of our other medium tanks. I believe it might have been the Centurion. I'm not 100% on that, but the other friendly medium, looks like the E50M, pulls over to where artillery was noted to be spotted. He manages to take one of them out, but in turn he gets taken out himself. So that leaves myself, the friendly bat chat, and the friendly E100 to close in on the enemy bat chat and Borsig, try and take them out before artillery can do some significant damage to us in return. Thankfully, the bat chat is able, on the right-hand side, is able to pull forward far enough where he spots out the enemy French artillery. and pinging the enemy artillery, hoping that somebody can take him out quickly. As right now, that artillery can still very easily wreck me. The top of this tank is not very well armored, so a direct hit from artillery, even with an HE shell, will easily penetrate and deal not only a lot of damage, but damage a lot of your modules, and very likely kill several of your crew members. So pulling forward, trying to get spots, I spot out the bat chat. I plant a quick snapshot on him. I took a hit from the Borsig. He was already aiming at me. I fully expected to die at this point, as the artillery was probably looking in my direction. I couldn't quite tell. So backing up just in the nick of time for the Borsig to miss his shot. At this point, I know I can take... I can't take another hit, so I decide I need to push forward and take out this Borsig. The Batchat will survive a shot, but the Borsig will not. Luckily for me, the Batchat low rolls his first shot, allowing me just enough time to aim in my shot and take out the Borsig at the very last second. So that's pretty much it for me in this game. Our friendly Batchat is able to make short order of their last artillery, and then their Batchat went in after our artillery, where he was promptly shotgunned by our friendly Tier 9 British artillery. So again, 4,510 damage dealt. Not a lot of assisted damage this time around, but still getting the most damage in the game. Quite easily, as I might say. So that's essentially the two games I wanted to show you in the T110E4. Like I said, it feels easy to get damage in this tank compared to other tanks. For example, my E4 has an average of over 3,000 damage every game. And the reason why that strikes me as kind of interesting is a lot of my medium tanks, in fact all of my medium tanks, a class of tank that I have much more experience in, and the tanks themselves I have much more experience in, none of them come even close to that. Most of them average around maybe, I believe it's about 2,300 or even 2,000 average damage per game. With my E4, it's averaging out at 3,000 damage per game. That's including a derpy game where I do 0 damage or even get just one penetrating shot for 700 damage. But it totally evens itself out for an average of 3,000 due to the constant, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 damage games with the T110E4. I find it quite easy to rack up a significant amount of damage with this tank in comparison to other things like mediums or especially my heavy tanks. Do I like the E4? Yes, I absolutely like the E4. Do I still feel dirty playing it? Yes, I absolutely still feel dirty playing it. 375 average penetration with the premium APCR rounds. That's just ridiculous, to be totally honest. But even the standard AP rounds at 295 alpha damage, that is more than enough alpha damage to put the hurt on any tank you come across at this tier in particular. So let's take a look at the overall grind to the E4 now that we're done with the actual review of the E4, and summarize if I feel that this tank is completely worth it. So taking a look at the US tech tree, opening it up here, it always takes a minute to load. So to go down the E4 line, you still have to start with the T18 and the T82 at tiers 2 and 3. These tanks should take you no time whatsoever to grind through, as it's only, I think it's only a couple thousand XP for even the T82. It's only like 3,000 XP, so those should be very easy to get through. Now for the actual E4 line, you can either jump to the M8A1 here at Tier 4, or if you would like to eventually go down the E3 line and want to start off at Tier 6 with the Jackson, you can get the T40, which is a non-turreted tank destroyer, which will jump to the Wolverine at Tier 5, and from the Wolverine at Tier 5 you can go to either the Hellcat or the Jackson at Tier 6. But for the actual E4 line, at Tier 4 you have the M8A1, which is a ridiculous tank to play. It's very quick to fully upgrade. You should breeze through the M8A1, and playing the M8A1, you want to hang back, you want to start sniping with it. You have a really high pen, good damage gun that shoots fairly quick. You've also got a really good camouflage rating and really good mobility, so this tank will prepare you for the next two tiers. At Tier 5 you get the T67, which fully upgraded is more of the same. Shouldn't take long to fully upgrade, seeing as how it's only a Tier 5, but you do need about 20,000 XP to get the Hellcat at Tier 6. So the T67, again, more of the same. You want to hang back. You want to use your camouflage to hang back and snipe with your high penetration gun. And you want to use your mobility to give you really good firing positions to really put the hurt on the Reds. Now, Tier 6, you get the M18 Hellcat. This is a player favorite. one of the best tier 6 tanks in the game. I totally agree. Personally, I feel it's a little bit overhyped, but it's still a really, really fun joy to play. Absolutely. Fully upgraded, this is one of the most dangerous tier 6 tanks in the entire game. Easily capable of pulling off really good games, even when bottom tier, as the final gun is very capable of damaging tier 8 tanks. The T25-2, this one is very hit or miss for some people. If you have experience playing medium tanks, you will likely not find this tank too awful to go through, but a lot of people seem to struggle with it because it does not have the tank destroyer penetration values that pretty much every other tank in this line gets. It's got very average penetration for tier 7. It's still about, I believe, what is it, 170, 180, which is quite good for tier 7, but it's very average for tier 8, to be totally honest. So it can struggle to pen tier 9s when you find yourself in a bottom tier game. But in all honesty, I had no problems with it. I felt this was the jewel of the line for sure. I had a lot of fun playing the T25 too. You got to use a much more medium tank kind of mentality. Get yourself in the right positions where you need to be, and keep your eyes open for side or rear shots on exposed tanks so that you can get your easy damage. The T28 prototype, I feel this tank is a piece of shit. And if you have not previously gone down the T110E4 line or fully upgraded the T28, which is the non-turreted tier 8 tank destroyer, this tank will be a major pain in the ass because it's 60,000 XP just to get the fully upgraded gun. And I'm not talking about going from stock to fully upgraded. I'm talking about going from the 105mm gun to the 120mm gun. That alone there is over 60,000 XP. This tank is slow. The gun is very unreliable. The frontal armor is very unreliable. You can still bully a lot of tier 8 and definitely tier 7 and 6 tanks with the frontal armor profile on this thing, but this thing's greatest weakness is how slow it is. You just can never get to where you need to be all the time to rack up a good amount of damage. If you rack up a good amount of damage with this tank, 9 times out of 10 is because you had a lucky game, and that's definitely how it was for me. I did not like this tank one bit. It is an artillery magnet because it's so slow. At tier 9, you get another gem of the line, the T30. I really liked this tank. This is one of my 3 tanks that got 2 marks of excellence, the others being the T25-2 and the Type T34 Chinese medium. I really liked the T30. However, if you have not fully upgraded the T95 previously, again, this will be a grind as this final 155mm gun is about, I believe, 70 or 80,000 XP just to fully upgrade it. However, it is totally worth it. This final gun absolutely makes the T30. I tried the 120 you get on the fully upgraded T28 prototype. I found it's just not working the way I'd like it to. With this 155mm gun, you can trade shots with anything of your tier and simply kill them with raw alpha damage and superior penetration. This gun absolutely makes the T30. I like the T30 a lot. For sure, 10 degrees of gun depression, pretty good frontal turret armor profile, and just ridiculous alpha damage and penetration values for its tier. And lastly, you've got the T110E4, which is what this video was about. All in all, I think it's a pretty good tank destroyer. If you're looking for something that's just ridiculously overpowered, that frustrates the crap out of other players, then get an E3. Simple as that. If you would like a very versatile machine that is balanced in all aspects and can simply do more than an E3 can in any given situation, then an E4 might be what you're looking for sure. It's not any more mobile than the E3, but the fact that it has a 180-degree rotating turret simply makes it much more versatile than any other non-turreted tank destroyer at tier 10 for sure. So that's basically a look at the entire grind for the T110E4, and I believe this episode's been going on for well over 30 minutes at this point, so I do apologize for the length of this video, but this will be the last one in the Road to the E4 series. Let me know below if you liked this kind of series, if you'd like to see more kind of tank destroyer line grinds, or if you'd like to see some heavy tank line grinds in this same kind of format where I first go over the aspects of the tank and then do some gameplay, as well as a synopsis of the tank as I go on with the episode. So that'll be it for this episode. As always, thanks very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this series. Personally, I felt it's well worth it to get an E4 at the end of this. I do like the tank, and I'm just liking it more and more as I continue to play it. Hope to see you in the next video or on the battlefield. This has been Mobius Y, signing off. and as always, happy tanking.